The price of dignity. Have you ever watched someone you know a quiet, ordinary face you see every day suddenly shatter your heart when you discover the weight of their hidden struggles? Imagine sitting alone in a chic, upscale restaurant and witnessing your house cleaner, the same girl who meticulously cleans your home with a soft smile, be utterly humiliated in front of strangers because she can only tearfully offer a $5 crumpled bill to cover her share of a blind date. Do you walk away, or do you step in, knowing that your action could change not just her life, but your own forever? Elias Thorne, a 46-year-old tech billionaire who built his empire from the ground up, wasn't the kind of man to waste time in crowded, fashionable places. Yet, on this particular Tuesday evening, he sat quietly in a corner booth at the Crimson Fig, a highly rated, dimly lit Italian spot in downtown San Francisco, concealing his identity behind a tailored dark suit and a simple baseball cap. Head come alone, a momentary escape from the relentless demands of boardrooms and mergers, hoping to eat a quiet meal without the usual entourage of assistants and security. As he raised his crystal water glass, his gaze snagged and held. Across the room, tucked timidly into a small table near the arched window, sat Maya Reyes, his house cleaner. The young woman mopped his imported marble floors every morning, often leaving a small, perfect jasmine flower on the hall table in his Pacific Heights mansion, earning barely enough to support her younger sister and their ailing grandmother in the Tenderloin. Elias had always noticed the quiet dignity she carried, even though her hands were often raw from work. But tonight, she wasn't in her uniform. She wore a faded, yet carefully ironed, cornflower blue dress, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes full of nervous hope. She was on a blind date. The man seated opposite her, however, carried his arrogance like a colonial flag. Tall, with slicked back hair, an expensive timepiece glinting on his wrist. His name, Elias gathered from their clipped conversation, was Bryce. Elias recognized his type immediately, the kind who thought inherited wealth defined intrinsic worth. Maya smiled shyly, trying to keep the conversation flowing, but Bryce scrolled through his phone between sips of wine, barely granting her a glance. Elias watched, his chest tightening. Something deep inside him refused to simply watch this unfold. The waiter arrived with the bill. Bryce leaned back casually, folding his arms. "So, you called me here, right? I assume you've got it covered." Marja's face went pale. She hadn't strictly called him. The date had been arranged by a mutual friend who'd emphasized splitting the bill. But she hadn't argued. Instead, she reached into her small, worn handbag, her fingers trembling. Slowly, she drew out a few wrinkled bills and a handful of change. She counted them twice, her cheeks turning a mortifying crimson. $5 and some change. That was everything she had for the night, painstakingly saved. Bryce's smile was wide enough for the nearby tables to hear the malice in it. $5. What is this, high school? You can't even cover an appetizer with that. Why would you agree to come to a place like this if you're broke? Pathetic. A sharp, cruel laugh rippled from a nearby couple. Marja's eyes glistened as she lowered her gaze, clutching the money as if it were both her deepest shame and her last bit of dignity. She whispered, I just wanted to meet someone. I thought." Maybe Bryce cut her off, waving dismissively at the maitre d'. "Don't bother. I'm not sticking around. I don't do charity cases." He stood up, left his half-finished drink, and strode out the door without a second look. The restaurant buzzed with cold whispers. Maya sat frozen, tears threatening to fall, trying desperately not to break. And at that precise moment, Elias Thorne, the tech mogul, stood up. He walked across the marble floor, the sharp tap of his polished leather shoes echoing against the hush that had fallen. When Maya saw him, her eyes widened in shock. She quickly wiped her cheeks, mortified that her employer had witnessed her humiliation. "Mr. Thorne," she stammered, her voice shaking. "Elias," he corrected gently, not letting her finish. He looked at the waiter, handed him a solid black credit card, the kind that signals a boundless line of credit, and said, with a quiet authority that silenced the remaining whispers, "Clear her bill." and then bring her the best dessert the chef has. The best you have." He then turned to Maya, his tone softening. "Maya, may I sit with you?" She hesitated, trapped between gratitude and overwhelming shame. Finally, she nodded, a small tear escaping. Elias sat across from her, studying her face. "You don't need to explain anything," he said softly. "But I want you to know something. What happened tonight has nothing to do with your dignity. That man couldn't see true worth if it stood in front of him. But I do." Maya bit her lip, unable to hold back the tears now. "I only had $5, sir. I thought it would be enough to show I was willing to try. I didn't want to look like I was nothing." Elias' heart ached at her words. She had nothing, yet she still carried herself with more grace than most of the wealthy socialites he knew. "Maya," he said firmly, "having only $5 doesn't make you less. It makes you stronger, because you still walked in here with hope. And he'll tell you this. If money is the only thing a man values in a woman, then he's not a man worth having." Maya finally let out a quiet sob, covering her face. Elias reached across the table, not to touch her hand, but to let his words hold her steady. "Look at me. You are not alone in this. Not tonight. Not ever again." The dessert arrived. A delicate slice of rich, dark chocolate torte with candied orange peel. Elias pushed it toward her. "Eat. Not because you have to prove anything, but because you deserve better moments than this." For the first time that night, Maya smiled faintly, even though her eyes were still wet. And Elias Thorne, who thought he had seen everything life had to offer, understood something unexpected. This wasn't about pity. It was about connection, about seeing someone society had overlooked, and perhaps something deeper, a protective instinct he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. The next morning, Maya expected silence. She thought Elias would forget the awkward incident, burying it under the crush of his busy billionaire life. But when she arrived at the mansion, a crisp, simple envelope was waiting for her on the hall table. Her name was written in Elias' strong, clear handwriting. Inside, there was no money, no check, only a handwritten note. "Maya, you don't have to face the world with only $5 anymore. But remember, even if you did, that would never define you. Let's start over, not as a house cleaner and an employer, but as two people who see each other for who they truly are. We will not speak of last night's event again, but I'd like to speak of a new one. Dinner, my treat. This time, no blind date, just us." Elias. Maya pressed the note to her chest. Tears streamed, but they weren't tears of sorrow or shame now. They were tears of validation. It wasn't about the wealth. It was about being seen, truly seen by the one person who could have easily ignored her, but who instead chose to champion her. Standing there in the quiet kitchen, Maya realized the crucial, universal truth of life's struggles. Sometimes, it's not the $5 that changes everything. It's one moment of genuine kindness from the most unexpected place. And Elias Thorne knew it too. That night at the Crimson Fig became the first chapter of a new story. Not just Marjol's, but his own. True worth isn't measured in dollars, but in dignity, empathy, and courage. When someone sees you for who you are, not what you have, that is when life truly begins to count. Is there anything else I can help you with regarding this story or another creative writing request?